let's go back just for a second because there's so few lines of code here. It's so simple and elegant that we miss some of that great architecture because it's so simple. Um, we've got set successor as our baked-in functionality, and it's so simple you don't need to include it any place else. So when we come over here, we already have access to a successor. We can do, and we know that successor is going to have a handle request, and we know that handle request is going to return back a game response. So we can say return successor dot handle request and pass in the game request. And before we do that, we can up here we can say to do login logic, right? So get rid of that. This is the bare bones of our login handler. So before we go any further with the login logic, we want to come back over to the Hive Mind. And we start looking through, and we've got some properties, and we've got some fields. Fields being private, public, and properties being public. And why don't we do this? We'll do what the handler is going to have. We'll make it private. It's going to have a base handler. And it's just going to say, we're just going to call it request handler. Let's go ahead and fix this so it looks the way that private fields should look. And the little squiggly is just saying that this thing's never actually being called. It's never used. Okay. So, we've got this static constructor. We've got this static hive mind. So we want to ensure that whenever the hive mind is created, we actually also get an instantiated handler. That's going to be really important. So we'll do that here. So this is where we would say that to make this guy static too, which is fine. That's what we want. So we're going to say request handler, and this is where you can automatically start doing set successor, right? If we wanted to. So this early, we can start setting up our operations, or we could have a switch statement someplace that has a different composed chain of operations depending on what comes in. So this is what we're talking about. It's really going to open up our ability to keep things clean, and to change things around as we like without adding a lot of complexity into our hive mind. But here, we just want to do a new, and the only thing we have available to us is the login handler. So we'll use that for now. We've got this new login handler. And so to keep things simple, what if we said that the request handler dot set successor, and we had to pass it in something, right? So after we handle the login operation, where do we want to go? So we said we want to have a command handler. Let's go ahead and do that. So add an item. Call it command handler. Public class command handler that inherits the base handler. We'll go ahead and implement the missing member. Right? And the same thing as the login handler, all we're going to be doing is returning the successor. So we're going to do some logic, and then we're going to return whatever the successor is. And we're going to harden this a little bit. But first, let's make our finalize handler. So once again, we're going to go public class finalize handler, takes in the base handler, implements our missing member, does some sort of finalize the logic, and then handles the request via the successor. So 2 questions we need to ask ourselves. First, what if this is the end of the chain? I can call successor. What if I haven't set a successor? I'm going to get a null exception. So, into my base handler, there's a good chance that on public base handler, I will convert you to be protected. Thank you. All right. So, instead of my base handler, there's a good chance that I want to either set my successor to default or within handler request, I want to make sure that it's not null. And if it is null, to go ahead and use like a default handler instead. So, there's quite a few questions. What I actually prefer to do is this. I'll do this to a public game response. And I will do, so this won't actually be handle request. This will be something else. Names. There was a great Channel 9 video I was watching the other day that said the 3 biggest problems any developer faces. And there's 2 other ones, but one of them was just naming things. All right, so we've been using process everywhere. So I will do process request and do a game request and a game request. As usual, I'm doing all this on the fly, so we'll see what works out. And then, would it be nice if this was protected and or private? It might be. And then here is where I'll do my checking. So this is what's going to be available to me via the Hive mind. And then internally, it's going to say, if successor does not equal null, then go ahead and return and a request. So we want something like that here. We want everything inside of this to be these things happen. Which alleviates our need, if we're going to do our successor stuff here, then it alleviates our need to have this guy here, right? And if that's the case, then this can go back to being void. We think. So that's our first bit of hardening, and we'll fix those problems in a second. But our first bit of hardening here is we want to call this dot handle request and pass in the game request. So this is going to be the class inside of our derived, or this is going to be the method inside of our derived class. And then if the successor does not equal null, then return back successor.handle request. So we're always dependent on the successor. Boom, boom, boom. Thinking, thinking, thinking. This is about as simple as we want it to get, but we do have a hairy bit in here. So let's go ahead and make this void. Well, not void, but just think our way through it real fast. We had said void. Is that really what we want? Okay. This is going to work. Let's do a few things differently. Let's make the handle request all game request in nature. Okay, so far so good. We no longer want to handle the successor request here. But we do want to process the game request and pass it back. Okay. So the last problem to solve in the first hardening task here is to take this default, very simple design pattern and turn something useful. And actually return something. So the last thing this thing has to do is turn that game request into a game response. Let's come back over to HiveMind. That's exactly what we have to work with here. Or does it make more sense to, when we get in a game response, to have from that point forward everything take back a game response? Questions, questions, questions. It'll work either way. Let's check out what we've got inside here and see if we want to actually mess with this. So, action room key sender target. Nope, definitely gotta be the game response. I think this